Imagine being born into a palace filled with gold, silks, and endless servants. From the outside, you seem destined for greatness. But behind those marble walls, your family has a dangerous secret. For generations, they've been marrying their cousins, uncles, even nieces, all to keep power locked inside the bloodline. The result? Some of history's most tragic women. Women born with twisted jaws, strange bodies, and even stranger fates. Tonight, we'll uncover their stories, how royal obsession with pure blood created lives that were anything but pure. Stay with me, because the further we go, the darker it gets. Inbreeding in royalty. Before we dive into specific women, it's important to understand why inbreeding was so common in royal families. For centuries, kings and queens believed their blood was sacred, chosen by God. To marry outside the family was seen as dangerous, even humiliating. So instead, they married cousins, uncles, nieces, and sometimes siblings. This was especially common in Europe, where dynasties like the Habsburgs, Bourbons, and Ptolemies ruled. They thought they were preserving power. In reality, they were creating genetic nightmares. And it's often the women, princesses, queens, empresses, who carried the visible scars of this practice. Joanna of Castile, Joanna the Mad. Our first tragic figure is Joanna of Castile, better known as Joanna the Mad. Born in 1479, she was the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, the same monarchs who funded Columbus. From a young age, Joanna was bright and deeply religious, but she also showed signs of instability. Historians argue whether she truly suffered from mental illness or whether her condition was exaggerated by political rivals. What we do know is this: Joanna came from generations of cousin marriages in the Trastamara dynasty. The genetic mixing pool was already shallow, and she inherited traits that likely fueled her mental decline. When her beloved husband, Philip the Handsome, died, Joanna's grief turned obsessive. She reportedly carried his coffin around, opening it to gaze at his decaying body. For the rest of her life, she was locked away, too unstable to rule. In her story, we see not only the tragedy of personal loss, but also the way inbreeding may have amplified her fragile mind. Margaret of Austria, the inbred bride. Next, we turn to Margaret of Austria, a Habsburg princess born in 1584. Margaret was married off to her first cousin, King Philip III of Spain. On the surface, she was everything a queen should be: pious, loyal, and fertile. She bore 8 children, but the Habsburgs had already been inbreeding for generations. Margaret herself had a family tree that looked more like a circle, and it showed. She suffered from poor health throughout her life, and many of her children died young. Her face also bore early signs of what became infamous: the Habsburg jaw, a protruding lower jaw caused by generations of close kin marriages. When Margaret died at just 26 during childbirth, many whispered that her weak constitution was no coincidence. She was the product of a family obsessed with blood purity, and it cost her everything. Maria Anna of Spain, the match no one wanted. If Margaret's fate was grim, her relative Maria Anna of Spain took things even further. Born in 1606, Maria Anna was considered for marriage across Europe. But there was a problem. She was already heavily inbred. When envoys described her to potential suitors, they noted her prominent jaw, awkward body, and sickly nature. Eventually, she was married to her own uncle, Ferdinand III of Austria. Despite this shocking union, she gave birth to several children, but many were frail and prone to illness. The cycle of inbreeding continued, ensuring that the dynasty's problems were passed on. Maria Anna's story highlights the brutal truth. Royal women weren't free to choose love. They were pawns in a political game, traded like property, even if it meant marrying their uncle. Maria Theresa of Spain and the broken body. Perhaps the most famous example is Maria Theresa of Spain, born in 1638. She was married to King Louis XIV of France, the Sun King. But Maria Theresa carried within her the crushing genetic baggage of the Habsburg family. She had the infamous Habsburg jaw, was of fragile health, and struggled to walk without difficulty. Though queen of the most powerful nation in Europe, she lived in the shadow of her husband's many mistresses. Maria Theresa gave birth to 6 children, but only one survived into adulthood. Historians point to the heavy inbreeding in her family as the cause of her weak health and repeated miscarriages. In portraits, her sad, solemn face reveals a woman who bore the weight of centuries of poor choices made by her ancestors. Mariana of Austria, the puppet queen. Finally, we reach Mariana of Austria, perhaps the most tragic of them all. Born in 1634, Mariana was betrothed to her uncle Philip IV of Spain. She was just 14 when she became his bride. Mariana was intelligent and politically active, but her body was frail. She gave birth to several children, most of whom died young. Her only surviving son was Charles II of Spain, widely considered the most inbred monarch in history. Charles was so deformed and sickly that he could barely chew food or walk properly. He was infertile, mentally unstable, and died young, ending the Spanish Habsburg line. And all of it traced back to women like Mariana, forced into marriages that trapped their children in a genetic prison. When we look at these women, Joanna the Mad, Margaret of Austria, Maria Anna, Maria Theresa, and Mariana of Austria, we see a chilling pattern. Each was born into unimaginable wealth and power, yet cursed by the very thing that was supposed to protect them, their pure blood. They were queens and empresses, but also victims of dynasties that prized politics over humanity. Their bodies, their health, and even their sanity were sacrificed for the sake of family pride. It's easy to dismiss these stories as relics of a bizarre past, but they remind us of an important truth. Power often comes with hidden costs, and sometimes the people at the very top are the ones who suffer the most. So the next time you see a golden crown, remember it may have been bought not just with war and conquest, but with the silent suffering of women trapped in their own bloodlines.